Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are getting around to, like I said last week, pleasure droids. So, in the fandom and actually in the lore of Star Wars, yes, there are things listed as sex droids. So, for the adult connoisseur, yes, there are droids for doing this. There are no actual definitive stats. I mean, they're only mentioned in passing. So, as you can see, I am here on my browser, and we have the Hybridyne 129 4, which is from Aliens. Very much in that same sense. Okay. Uh, when we look at these droids in Aliens, it's trying to get all the thoughts here together because this all gets to be a little complicated. The simplistic answer is, we've seen this in Aliens. There's two different versions. Okay, so we have a red and a green series, which is a male and a female model. For the long trips, it gives a pleasure droid that the crew can use to kind of unwind with in certain aspects for the long journeys. And, in Star Wars, I've thought about it in those same ways. You have like your independent freighter captains and so on and so forth, where it only requires a crew of one or two. Um, so why not have droids that are going to help them with these long periods of time of being kind of lonely. Think of it like today's truck drivers. Okay, um, they're on the road all the time. They don't really have a lot of interaction with people. They're going off to here, they're going off to there, and some people, they're just socially awkward. You can look at them, you can say, yeah, they're socially awkward. They just have a hard time dealing with other sentient beings. So, in those regards, yes, this would fill that niche. Um, I've got three models that I did stats up with, and we'll get into those here shortly. But you know, we've seen this trope in Aliens. Um, I've brought up Ghost in the Shell in the last one, but yes, Ghost in the Shell. They had Geisha droids. Um, shoot, I know there was a couple other. Was it Ex Machina, where it kind of goes into some of that same theme, where the lines between humanity and AI life forms kind of get blurred here. Uh, what's what? Now, I will say in Star Wars, there is a lot of resentment towards droids in a lot of regards, and they are definitely seen more as just machines and tools. When we look at Star Trek, which is funny because we look at Data and we look at, yes, he's fully anatomically correct. I mean, him and um, ah, Christ, Nyan Tasha Yar had a little fling, and then she regretted it later. Things happen. Um, then they bring in the exocoms in Star Trek, which is bringing more just regular droids, and they're kind of looked at a little bit more like Star Wars does. So this goes from different genres. It's not just one genre or another. Droids are looked at differently in a lot of different respects, but when you get down to the heart of it, most droids are just seen as tools. Yes, they can kind of be companions for those that are, you're out there. They develop their own little personalities. You get to see them as part of your crew, part of your family. We do that with our 2 and 3PO. They're seen more as regular people than they are really as droids, and I think there's a lot of people that do look at them that way, like to put it in the same aspect, like a dog or another family pet. yes, it's there as a pet, but it's part of your family. If you lose them, you're gonna unfortunately cry, break down, because it becomes a part of you and your lifestyle, a part of the common factor that you wake up every day and you got to feed the dog or the cat, and they're there and they brush up against you, wanting to be pet, and they bring smiles to your face when you're down and help liven you up when you're not feeling so good. And you know, I'm not going to say that droids can't do some of that as well. Other droids might be just a royal pain in the rear, and you might just want to kick them or something like that, and you just understand that they're just that kind of a droid. So there is going to be those back and forths. So looking into this, we look into the Hyperdyne systems. We'll start off here. The Hyperdyne 129-4 was a high-end pleasure, love, slave, synthetic model popular amongst some high-class circles in Earth in the 21st century, or the 2100s, so 22nd century. Judith was one such synth, or synthetic. All right. Now this comes from Aliens Earth Hive, Aliens Labyrinth novel, Aliens Rogue novel, Aliens Infernal Fall, mentioned only. So we don't get a lot of good insight into some of this stuff, but we see later on that yes, we do have droids that are there. And as I throw this all out here, I do want to say that even though I'm presenting figures that would be female, because I'm male, so of course I'm probably going to generate more female. And I think more likely you would see more female droids being produced. But I'm not going to say that there's not going to be male droids produced. Um, and as the ones that I'm presenting here, these are just generics. I just found some AI animated girl pictures or whatever that weren't too saucy or whatever, which is a funny blend here, and try not to go down that rabbit hole. Um, but it's one of those things. As I present this, keep in mind, as there are multiple beings out in the galaxy, especially in Star Wars, the droids themselves would be tailored towards whoever. Okay, there's going to be high end, low end, probably mid grades, however you want to work this all out. Okay, so I'm just putting this all out here so we have that in reference. So, unfortunately, looking at the fandom, this is really what we have. But we do have the David model, which is what we saw in. Um, if I can bring this up. Um, So let's look at what we have written here. So synthetics, also known as androids, or some synthetics themselves prefer to be called artificial persons, or APs, were biomedical humanoids closely emulated humans in both appearance and actions. Synthetics once constituted a high industry and were in widespread use throughout the galaxy, but a violent rebellion ultimately led them to being declared illegal, with virtually all exhibit units being destroyed in a mass recall, uh, which is one of the things that they kind of tried to bring up in, like Star Trek. Once you have so many of them, do they not become a being of themselves? Will they not revolt against those that are now their oppressors, and so on and so forth? Which in Star Wars, that has happened in the cartoons. When they had the old droids cartoon, there was a planet where it was essentially nothing but droids, and they were trying to overthrow their creators. So it was even thought about way back then. Um, so keep all this in mind. I mean, this is, the stats and everything is really meant more for Star Wars, but this idea and everything to go along with it is multi franchise. It's something that's gone across the spectrum throughout the years, and it asks just some of the questions about how would we actually manage this state. And unfortunately, we are getting closer to a possibility of this today with the androids that are being produced today, and Unfortunately, in a lot of areas, there is a lot of loneliness on both sides. Um, men and women are both looking for some companionship, and are they going to look for a possible droid to fill that niche? So, getting into the synthetics were first developed by uh, Borgia Industries around 2030. The early Ulysses models were hulking bipedal constructs that were closer resembling to mechanical robot than a synthetic human. Although they featured a humanoid driver at the core, they were widely employed by uh, Neapolis Police Department, often used for riot suppression as well as in private security ventures. By the late 21st century, synthetics had advanced to such a degree that they were externally identical to a normal human being. Wayland Corporation developed the David series introduced in 2025. David 8 was essentially indistinguishable from humans. This model was followed by Wayland Utania's aesthetically identical yet upgraded Walter model. Though synthetics were a form of artificial intelligence with a broad sense, legally they are classified as property. However, their usefulness and considerable unit cost served as a deterrent to anyone who wished to treat an android as expendable. By the late 22nd century, synthetic production was carefully controlled by the authorities, but the fact remained that they were uh, that any legitimate technology would, sooner or later, be co opted by the underground. The sex industry led the charge, of course, but a surprisingly popular byproduct of that facsimile pets created for the super wealthy. By 2202, the organization Humans First held rallies revolting around the destruction of synthetics, which is somewhat of the view that has been noted in a lot of the Star Wars storylines as well. Um, when we look at it in that same regard, mainly because they're taking jobs away. Um, yes, it's nice to use droids, especially in areas where it's too hazardous for humans, which is the original goal for having androids. But when they start taking over normal jobs and they start becoming too, in a sense, human, at that point, people start resenting them and they start not really liking them, which I think is why we see more of them in the Star Wars universe as being a poly steel or a poly external covering. So that way you can definitely tell the difference between droid and sentient being. So the company literally made you when you were top of the line. You flew fancy ships, did complex surgeries, wiped out innocent off world species. Now you are obsolete. You drive trucks, clean toilets, give plug and play therapy sessions, whatever gives the company its money's worth. You were designed to complete certain tasks, and those are the tasks of which you are capable. Nothing more ever. You have no autonomy. Iris Humphreys to Bishop from Alien Bloodlines. Now, although the android's cosmetic appearance would seem to be, uh, I'm going to mess up this word, superfluous feature, practical experience has shown that most humans are physiologically unable to iterate uh, or interrelate with a inhuman looking android. As a result, the physical appearance and simulated behavior patterns of Android units were designed to particular specifications, to personalities, idiosyncrasies aside, can best be described as passive or non threatening. Let's see, we have this is, or it's like performing an autopsy right up until I slice through the last layer of dermis and reveal the mechanical structure beneath, regarding Viola from Alien Echo. The modern synthetic is a highly complex machine, stronger, faster, and better coordinated than the average human. The basic chassis is a carbon fiber skeleton with latch moment point for the artificial musculature. The muscles themselves were vat grown, silicone coiled, powered either by pumped microhydraulics or electrostimulation. Power of the Android is supplied by a 25 kilowatt hydrogen fuel cell with the life of approximately 400 days between refueling. The power cell is located within the Android's chest. The access is via a hidden socket located just beneath the rib cage. Charging time can vary, although usually takes at least 72 hours to fully charge the standard power cell fitted into a modern day Android. All right. As in humans, the skeletal structure is inherently unstable and is effectively suspended by musculature. No limb locking, joint motorization, or gyrostabilization is present, as in other an- anthropomorph. Oh goodness gracious! I'm going to mess this one up again. Anthropomorphic frames such as power loaders. Instead, the muscles must work actively to keep the chassis standing upright while active feedback systems control its stability. Though the muscles can withstand considerable wear and tear, the lack of self repair capabilities means they will eventually lose their strength and elasticity over time. Regular overhauls are required to maintain efficiency, and individual elements should be replaced every 2 years, depending on workload, muscle layout, and operation. As with certain other internal functions, are homologous and those of the human body. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The circulatory fluid is a form of white liquid latex used to lubricate their interior systems. Intelligence and personality. Current synthetics typically possess an integrated carbon 60 processor brain with the processing speed of 10 to the 15th power floating point operations per second. Memory capacity includes 1 terabyte of fast cache buffer RAM and 1.2 petabyte of non volatile memory. The system of architecture around a very powerful heterocyclic heuristic logic driver designed to make decisions based upon imported sensory data, information drawn from experience in other androids' vast inbuilt databases. Intuitive functions are derived from a suite of nested complexual and Semitic programs linked by self-mapping loop of tangled hierarchies. However, an android's ability to understand and process abstract concepts and symbolism, though powerful, is limited. A synthetic mind and personality is essentially a construct, and there is no true self awareness as such, though this may not be at all apparent to the untrained observer interacting with the unit. These androids, designed for close social interactions with humans, are able to eat, drink, although they gain no nutrients from anything they consume. Food and drink is broken down into an artificial stomach cavity, and the resulting liquid is expelled via a retractable catheter. All synthetics, even those of the same model, have their own personality randomized with unique quirks as they live or leave the production line, making each unit subtly different from its peers in terms of character. Androids display synthesized emotion, superficially registered self awareness, and most importantly of all, have the ability to reason, conceptualize, and offer opinion. However, these capabilities do not interfere or do not infer human like consciousness, even though, for all their inherence or intents and purposes, synthetics are artificial intelligence. Those synthetics do not require a breathable atmosphere. Hostile environments are still damaging. Corrosive atmospheres will melt them. Extreme pressure will squash them. Flat and hard vacuum will explode them. Even prolonged exposure of low atmospheric pressure can cause uh, viral trauma and embolism in the synthetic unit due to the high proportion of fluid colloids used in the manufacture of its musculature and skin. While they are waterproof, their internal workings are extremely vulnerable to hydrostatic shock. The android immersed in water that has been damaged to the point where the internal workings are exposed risk being electrocuted. Now we have drawbacks. Despite their advantage in speed, strength, and overall, humans have their very imperviousness to pain. Androids are not especially tough. Indeed, they are somewhat fragile when compared to human beings. While some combat units are hardened against damage, common units are not so protected. While the skeletal structure of an android is sturdy, the electronics and musculature are extremely vulnerable to hydrostatic shock and explosive effects from small arms fire. Direct fire to the central processor or power cell will result in immediate deactivation of the unit. Though in most cases, a partially destroyed android can continue to function, albeit handicapped. And one interesting consequence of synthetics construction is that they are, at least under certain circumstances, virtually immune to xenomorph aggression. On several occasions, androids have seemingly been spared by xenomorphs when a human in the same situation would undoubtedly have been attacked or captured. Most notably, Annalee Call and Antuin fell into water uh, mere meters from a cloned xenomorph drone aboard the USM Ariga. Uh, and yet she was not harassed or assaulted in any way. Similarly, uh, Katia managed to survive alone for some time on BG 386 despite being located in the middle of a heavily infested research facility and making little effort to hide. Although she had suffered some damage, possibly from xenomorph attacks, the drone that caused chaos on Sevastopol Station is ignored, and Sigurdsson working Joe synthetic that worked there, although several torn up synthetics aboard the station suggested the creature may have attacked droids under certain circumstances. In the novelization of Aliens, Bishop is attacked by a xenomorph through a small opening whilst crawling through the ductwork toward a colony uplink, however, or uplink tower. But when he reacts by freezing, the creature immediately loses interest. Bishop goes on to theorize that the xenomorphs may react partially to movement, but also to some other aspect of a living organism's anatomy that is synthetic does not share. Furthermore, Bishop postulates that if a synthetic does not respond to attack aggressively with resistance, it is ignored merely as a piece of machinery, whereas a human in the same situation would still be viewed as a desired target. Wayland UNT scientists have theorized about the potential of a synthetic being impregnated by a face hugger, while the likelihood that a chest burster can be successfully implanted in a synthetic is very low. The same scientists nonetheless proposed the use of synthetics as a means to acquire a xenomorph specimen, essentially sending one into a nest of eggs to be attacked before returning with a face hugger attached. Several Dark Horse comic series, as well as other more recent Alien vs. Predator video games, have also suggested that xenomorphs use the pheromones produced by living beings as actually detect, see, or locate their prey. Since synthetics do not possess such chemicals, the aliens apparently can't sense their presence as they do with human beings. Thus, they usually tend to ignore androids as long as they do not make sudden movements or are not disturbed or attacked by them. Despite evidence suggesting a degree of immunity, there have also been instances where synthetics have been targeted by xenomorphs as would any other victim. Most notably, Bishop was torn apart by the first Archon Queen aboard uh, Sulaco despite making no aggressive moves towards the Queen. However, there were arguably unique circumstances involved. The Queen was alone on the ship and in range following the destruction of her hive on LV 426 below, and may have attacked Bishop for a number of other reasons, including revenge or simply out of prudence or of being directly in the way. Other examples include the shop steward and his android militia being targets of xenomorph infestation or other synthetics within Casper Nordling's research facility being constantly endangered by xenomorphs there. Okay, we're going to kind of end this part here. Um, I think we get a good gist of it. As time progresses, I don't have the stats anymore. I might be able to find them somewhere. Someone in one of the D6 magazines years ago had actually done stats for xenomorphs, uh, the Terminator, the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, as well as the T2000, and the like. I don't know if I can find those stats anymore. I will do a deep dive into that if or when I get a chance, and we'll get into those at some point. But we'll leave this alone, and we will get into our D6 stats, and we'll kind of talk about this and go from there. Okay, so let's look at what we have. Now, these are the first two are cheap pleasure droids, okay? Um, where I originally grabbed the stats from are actually the original kind of posted stats for the B1 battle droid and the pilot droid. Now, the reason why I grabbed those are they're old. As far as the brain modules or the programming is going to be older tech, something that maybe someone's going to be able to come across or whatever else and use that as a basis. That's the reason why I'm really grabbing this. And when we look at the stats here, they're not overly impressive. Okay, that is the true reason why I'm starting off with these. Now, the brain module, the actual brain cell that we're going to throw inside the skull here, you know, droids could still technically grow. It's just that they're used as cannon fodder so much that I don't think they really get a big opportunity. I think that you might have ones that are just programmed a little bit better, and as they might last longer, they might show that initiative to actually get promoted to a higher level. But In that same vein, they all start from somewhere. So if somebody had a copy of the original programming and said, hey, look, I can recreate the brain here, or a simple brain that can hold this and still grow and expand, um, it's a good start. And it keeps the cost low, which is really what I wanted to start with for the cheap ones. Now, I did not go real high end, although they have what they call human droids, um, which would really be the high end. And those are like 100,000 credits. So I didn't put them in here. I only did the cheap ones, two models, and a kind of medium level, really, which is kind of taken off of the BD 3000. So I'm being honest where I'm grabbing the stats here. If you feel that this is wrong, take from any other droid you want, because the reason why I'm doing this is I don't think you're going to find a lot of main manufacturers doing this, or if they're doing it off on the side. Mainly because the feeling towards droids in a lot of regards. And this does kind of blend a little bit back and forth. Now, I've just, like I said before, I just have some anime pictures of some, anime girls. Okay. And the height here is 1.5 meters tall. So that puts them at 5 feet. If we're going to do male units, or you want a bigger unit, put in a bigger unit, keep the price about the same. My envision of this really is, um, we have, and I'll try and get a picture up here so we can do this in post editing here. Especially in the droids book, they have where you have one or two people that are actually building these droids in essentially an assembly line unit. That is my idea of this. We're going to have different droids that are kind of done up in different ways. So as you're ordering a droid, you can custom order it. They're going to have base body styles, different colors, whether you want a Twi'lek, a humanoid, whatever you want. You could easily just order it as that. So when you are putting it in here, um, for the body or humanoid body or whatever, if you want to make it look like a certain species, I would say go for it. Just because I'm putting up, like I said, human anime girls, whatever, um, it doesn't mean that it couldn't be, a Zabrak, or you know, uh, a Twi'lek, or anyone else, um, Trandoshan, anyone. I mean, think about it in those regards. Because if you're a captain and you're on a ship and you want companionship, but you just don't have the time because you're always out in space or whatever, those are the ones that I really feel are going to grab the cheap ones because they're always out and about. Now, one, that keeps the price low. Two, that means that we don't have all the extra nice fun stuff in the stats. And you'll see the price difference between the first one and the second one. So as the first one, this is kind of a protector series based off the base B1 battle droid. Okay. Having a dexterity, knowledge, mechanical, perception, and technical, they're all 1D. Our strength is a 1D plus 2. Now, the only skills that are boosted up is blaster. Now, originally it was brawling, but I put it towards lifting because this is, like I said, kind of like a co-pilot or someone to have on the ship. Yeah, it's a pleasure droid, but you're still, as a ship captain, going to want it to be able to do something. Um, and a blaster of 2D is not a very good skill, but it is something. Okay. So if you're out and about, yeah, you can have something there, however you want it to look. Um, and it can be there to help watch your back. Is it going to be good at it? Not really. Is it going to be good at a lot of things? Not really. That's why it's cheap. Um, and we have a humanoid body with the 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, visual and audio sensors, human range, has the vocabulary to speak to you, and it's all covered with syntheflesh. Now, keep this in mind. One of the original things on the B1 Battle Droids was for 800 credits. Now, I'm 1,000 credits higher for being what it is. It actually had the hardened armor on it, which might cost the same, maybe not. I don't know. Um, for the Synthaflesh, um, but I'm swapping out the hardened armor for the Synthaflesh and the body style it is. Of course, this is going to be a similar frame, and this might be a similar frame style that maybe they all use. Okay, in that industry, they may have a certain frame that they're all kind of using, and it works out. It's fairly cheap and inexpensive, but what you're really paying for is one, the sensors that it's going to have on it, um, and two are really going to be its programming. How much more useful is it going to be? Is it just going to be something dumb that can just do very basic things? Can't really cook, but you could give it a whisk and it can kind of just sit there and whisk some eggs for you, or something like that. So it's all in relative perspective, and I just want that to be kind of thrown out there. So it does have a movement of 10, so it would be able to keep up with you while walking and all that stuff. It's going to have to learn a lot of things, so you're going to have some trial and errors with it, and you might just leave it on board the ship most of the time because it really doesn't have very good stats. In bulk, if you bought a whole bunch of these, yes, that's what the battle droids were originally for. You throw them out in bulk. This, as a basic starting droid, it can walk around, it can show off whatever outfit you have it in. Um, it may not be the greatest conversationalist you're ever going to have, but it is something there. Okay. Now, when we get to the pilot droid, being a pleasure pilot droid. Now, this is actually a little bit more expensive, only by 200 credits. It was originally, or trying to remember exactly how much it was. I think it was 1,000 credits, so it was only about 200 credits more for this. So I'm still using that same programming. Okay, it could be the same brain cell. It's just the programming's been upgraded here. But it does have a dexterity of 2D, a knowledge of 1D, mechanical is now 4D, perception is 1, strength is our 1D plus 2, and technical is 1D. Now, our blasters are improved. We have a 3D instead of a 2D. Our melee combat has a 3D. Missile weapons is 3D. Vehicle blasters is 3D. It can pilot some basic stuff. Mechanical, being a 4D, now has an astrogation of 5D. Repulsor lift operation is 4D. So this will work as a secondary pilot. Can you input the astrogation or whatever while whoever you are actively piloting? Even if it's doing the piloting, it's still at a 4D. So it is upgraded. Strength being the same, lifting instead of brawling, so it can pick up boxes to try and move things around for you. Technical is a 1D, but computer programming and repair is a 1D plus 2. So if you needed to diagnose just simple things going on with the ship, it can actively do that a little bit more now. Again, we only have that humanoid body, um, visual and audio sensors at human range, the vocabulator, and synthaflesh. Still the same move of 10 and a size of 1.5 meters tall, 5 feet tall. Now we get into our kind of medium end, or whatever you want to call it, if you want to consider this more of a high end. This is probably going to have more sensor mesh into it. Okay, so it could tell what else is kind of going on. Uh, when you're doing your adult things to it, it might respond more. Keep that in mind. Where the other ones might just, okay, well, this is just a function. This may respond back to you. All right, still having a dexterity of 1, has a knowledge of 4D. But again, having our gee whiz, I cannot speak here this morning. Bureaucracy of a 5D, our cultures of 60, so it can interact and understand different cultures and what's going on. The languages is of 7D. And in there are linguistic database with over 3 million languages. Our value, so it can appraise things at 5D. Mechanical is a 1D. Repulsor lift operation is a 4D. The same thing that we saw with the BD 3000. Perception is 1D. Bargain is 4D. Strength is 1D. So they're not very strong. These are very much like what we were looking at with the aliens androids. They're not the most resilient. Um, Technical is a 2D, but it can do cooking, tailoring, first aid, and childcare. Cooking and first aid are at 5D, tailoring and childcare is at 6D. So, yes, you could use this as a maid and whatever. Um, and that kind of brings into a thought that, there was a show that a gentleman had gotten a android for his household to help take care of the kids, but because it had the special features and he was using it for that on the side, and the drama in the series. I don't know the series. I got told about it by a fellow. um, I couldn't tell you the name of the series, but it's an interesting concept, and it's that same thread between all these different series, that same overarching, how the lines can get blurred here. But we do have the humanoid body, the visual and audio sensors at human range, the vocabulator, um, and of course, it talked about the linguistic database and the synthaflash. And again, it's got a move of 10. It's going to be about 1.5 meters tall, 5 feet tall, and this is at 25,000 credits. Uh, if you want to expand on it, go ahead. If you want to grab some other droid for that, the skills, that's fine. I would say use whatever that droid is and add like an extra 1,000 credits to it for the Syntha Flash. Okay. And then make it to whatever you want it to look like. Um, Even if you want it to look like an Ugnaught or something like that. I mean, you have that opportunity. It's your universe, your story. Use it for whatever. Just because it's designed that way, maybe you rescued it and it's now part of your collection. I mean, maybe you rescued it from a bandit or something like that, and whatever. And maybe you treat it in a very humane way. Maybe you don't even realize it is a droid. Maybe you think it's just another sentient being. That's perfectly fine too. One of the things I will say with this, from Lobot. Now this comes from Kraken's Rebel Field Guide. Uh, when we look at Lobot, he has two memory modules. I would say probably in the back of the head, underneath the hair, we should have a spot for two memory modules, or maybe the higher end one here would have a spot for four, but the basic one's only the two. Okay, so that way you could put in a memory chip or whatever, memory module that would increase its skills on certain things. So you could put it in there, and maybe now even the old basic one that has very little knowledge on anything could now have a couple of them and say, hey, I can swap this out. I can put this in here, and now I know said skill. And I know that in the Kraken's Rebel Field Guide, they do have prices for all that stuff. So that would be a very easy thing to be able to throw in there. So just keeping it at that. Like I said, I did not throw in the higher end one at 100,000. I felt that this was more than enough. Gets our feet wet into this. I don't really want to go any farther into this. This is a sticky subject in a lot of regards, and like I said, in our modern world, we are getting closer to having stuff like this. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, I sillily, in a silly, stupid way, I think there's probably a market for this more so than what a lot of us would want to acknowledge. Um, And where it goes, I don't know. But I know in Star Wars, it has been mentioned in there. Um, we never got stats on it because this gets into a slippery slope of, well, where do you go? What do you? How do you bring this in here? In role playing game sense, I mean, we're trying to keep this family friendly. So as adults, if we bring this in here, fine. We can do whatever we want, but keep it in perspective, and that's all I really ask. Um, and we'll see how well this goes. With that, thank you so very much for joining me today. It's wonderful having you here. It's kind of an odd subject. I kind of opened my mouth. I said I'd do it, and here we are. It's it's just an odd subject to really kind of cover, um, and I think I spent more time just trying to find things that look kind of eye pleasing to a male sense, but not too much, skin being shown and stuff like that. It seems like you go one way or the other. So just trying to get something out there. And my wife laughed at me when I was talking about it, and it just is what it is. Thanks again for stopping by. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Um, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, always feel free to give me a comment. I don't mind, even if you think I'm way off the reservation on this, or even if you disagree for the need for any of this stuff. That is perfectly fine. And in some regards, I would say, yeah, well, hopefully you shouldn't, but unfortunately, I think there's going to be some that are probably going to be looking for this. And in that regard, that's another reason why I'd never put up who any manufacturer really would be. I think you're going to find in seedy areas on Coruscant, probably, as well as other core worlds. You're going to find places that have these. Um, not in higher end establishments. I think if they did have one, it would be in a back room, hidden away, kind of whispered about or whatever, but not actively shown. I don't think it would go over well. I think this is something that it's going to be smaller shops, smaller independent manufacturers. Not saying industrial automation couldn't be producing it and selling it on a shadier line or something like that, or some of the other bigger manufacturers, but I don't think they're going to have it out in the average open venues that we would see most droids. So, with that, I will see you in the next video.